Hello and welcome to Run Testers. My name's Nick. In this video we're going to be comparing the Hoka Rocket X2 and the Saucony Endorphin Elite. So the Elite and the Rocket X2 are two new carbon shoes for 2023 and both are quite big departures to what we've seen in the past from the brands involved. The Endorphin Elite is a very expensive shoe. It's £280 in the UK or $275 in the US, whereas the Rocket X2 is £220 or $225. Both nice and light. The Endorphin Elite actually is the lighter shoe at 219 grams or 7.7 ounces in my UK size 9, whereas the Rocket X2 is 225 grams or 7.9 ounces in a UK 9. Rocket X2 is the lower drop shoe. It's 5mm from heel to toe, whereas the Endorphin Elite is 8mm. With the Endorphin Elite, you've got a knit mesh upper with lots of weird cutouts and overlays to try and keep it nice and light. A little bit of padding at the heel there, but not a lot of structure at the heel, as you can see. You've got a Power Run HG midsole, which is a new foam from Saucony this year. It's designed to deliver even more energy return than the Power Run PB foam we've seen in things like the Endorphin Pro 3. You've got a carbon plate running through the midsole with a slotted design at the front to give you a little bit of flexibility, and Saucony Speed Roll Rocker technology, which is even more aggressive and pronounced than on the Endorphin Pro 3. On the outsole, you've got rubber coverage at the forefoot there and one strip at the back to try and keep the weight nice and light, and to that end there's also a big midsole cutout that you can see the carbon plate through. The Hoka has a synthetic mesh upper, once again with very little structure at the heel and actually weird padding on either side, which has caused a little bit of a problem in terms of heel rub for me. Got a ProFly X midsole, which is PEBA based with two densities of foam, a slightly softer layer on the top and a firmer layer beneath, and a scooped full length carbon plate running through those two layers. And then you've got, again, rubber outsole key areas. You've got two strips in the back of this shoe and pretty good forefoot coverage, and once again a very big midsole cutout that shows the carbon plate and reduces the weight.
So a word on fit then. I ran in a UK 8.5, which is my normal size in both of these shoes. There's a distinct difference here. One is that the Hoka Rocket X2 is very, very tight and hugging, bordering on the too tight. It's quite hard to get on initially. It is just about comfortable for me over longer distances. I've done 3 hours in it and that was kind of fine, but I know that some people are going to find it very, very hugging and very tight, perhaps a little bit too cramped. The flip for that is the Saucony Endorphin Elite. It's got a bit of a fussy kind of upper. The heel, takes a bit of positioning to get into place with those sort of cushion pads that you've got at the sides behind either side of the kind of Achilles that a lot of super shoes have. But overall, it's a roomier fit. There's a bit more flex, a bit more wiggle room. I think that runs a little bit more true to size, whereas with the Rocket X2, if you could get quarter of a size up, that's what I'd be going for. You can't. I think half a size up might be too much. So overall on fit, I think the Endorphin Elite, it's roomier than the Rocket X2. So you've got to make a choice there.
So the fit for me in both of these shoes is true to size. I've got no issues at all with the Hoka Rocket X2. It's quite a tight fitting shoe, so if you've got wide feet, you may have a problem with this shoe, but I would definitely stick true to size. It's just a bit snug. The Endorphin Elite is similar. I would go true to size in this shoe, but I would say that I do have a lot of problems with the comfort of this shoe. When I've done races wearing this shoe, I have found it to be a little bit uncomfortable and the ends of my toes do tend to rub a bit, so it might be that I need to go up half a size. It definitely feels like it's true to size, but I do have those issues with it, so we're keeping those in mind.
Both shoes are the right length and I'd say the right size for me in my normal running shoe size, so they are true to size, and I've had no problems at all with the Endorphin Elite. That's not been the case with the Hoka though. I do have had some heel rub issues with this shoe on any run really that goes beyond about half an hour. Heel locking the shoe and doing it up nice and tight has mostly fixed the issue, but I'd say this heel design is not perfect. It's something I'd look out for with the Hoka, but I had no problems at all with the Endorphin Elite.
This is an interesting versus because these two shoes are in many ways quite similar. They both have the same sort of lightness. They both feel like very lightweight, fast shoes. They both feel very similar when you put them on the feet, but I think the Endorphin Elite is probably a little bit better when it comes to running faster. I definitely feel like it's a lot more aggressive when you're running in it. It feels like it's pushing your foot into a position to really propel you forward and tip you onto the forefoot. And it really does feel very fast to run in. It just has this very propulsive feel to it. It's a long way from something like the Saucony Endorphin Pro 3, which is a very natural feeling shoe. This is very aggressive. And I think because of that, it probably will suit certain people, but for me, it's not a very comfortable, enjoyable ride. I can feel it forcing my foot into a position. I run fast in this shoe. I've actually got my half marathon PB in this shoe, but I did find it quite uncomfortable to wear during that. It just didn't feel very natural to me. And although I was pleased to get that PB, it wasn't an enjoyable experience just because of the way that my foot felt throughout the course of that run. So the Hoka Rocket X2, I haven't actually raced in it yet. I've been to track in it a couple of times. And I've done fast intervals in it as well. I really like this shoe. When I first got it, I wasn't too sure about it because one reason was because I just got back from Barcelona and I started running in it and my legs were hurting a bit anyway. So it was a bit of an unfair test time. So I've run it quite a few times since then and I've really warmed to this shoe quite a bit. I don't think it is as noticeable as the Endorphin Elite. It's definitely a fast shoe, definitely a lightweight feeling shoe, definitely nice and propulsive. It really helps you just pick up a nice fast pace and maintain it for a while. But I don't think it's really got any standout features. It doesn't feel to me like it's really bouncy. It doesn't feel like it's massively propulsive. It just feels like a very fast, lightweight shoe, which is a good thing. And I can definitely feel like I can run very fast in this shoe and I have no issues in doing it. It just doesn't have that same level of aggressiveness that the Endorphin Elite has. Now, when I ran Brighton Half Marathon in the Endorphin Elite, I picked this shoe because I was race testing it. And for the first 10K, I felt really good. I felt like I was really propelling forward quite quickly. I was getting quite a fast time. It was pretty close to my 10K time, my 10K PB when I was running in this shoe. But because of the fit issues I have with this, or the bit of rubbing that I get on the toes and a bit of uncomfortableness I get in the midsole, mainly around sort of the arch and forefoot area, I do find it quite hard shoe to run in. And I definitely wouldn't use this for anything unless I was going all out for a PB attempt and I wanted to get the fastest shoe possible that really forces me to run fast. I've tried using this on slower runs. I did a 16-mile run in this, which is more like my training pace, which is like 4 minute 50 kilometers, 4 minute 50 per kilometer, and I didn't enjoy it for that at all. It just felt like you just knew I was using it for the wrong thing, and it just wasn't working very well. It was a very uncomfortable run, and it just didn't offer any benefits when I wasn't going all out, like flat out training or flat out running. So I really would reserve this for faster runs. The Hoka Rocket X2, I think, is a little bit more versatile than that. It's definitely a fast shoe, but I have done training runs in this where I've been running at my training pace, and I've not had any issues with it. It's not a great shoe for training in, as you'd probably expect from a carbon plate race shoe, but it's not bad. It still feels quite comfortable. I like the level of cushioning in this shoe. I know Nick thinks it's a softer shoe. I don't really think it's that soft, especially when compared to things like the Hourfly, Vaporfly, all the other carbon plate shoes, Metaspeed Sky, things like that. It just doesn't feel anywhere near as soft as those shoes for me. It actually feels more like the Puma Velocity Nitro Elite 2 for me in how it rides. But it is a comfortable shoe, and it probably could use it for more than just race day, because I do find it to be relatively comfortable on a lot of runs. I wouldn't use it for slow runs. I wouldn't use it for long, comfortable miles. But when I'm trying to get a consistent pace, I think it's a very good shoe. So similar shoes, but definitely I think the big difference for me is that aggressiveness of the Endorphin Elite and how it makes your foot feel on the run. The other thing I'd say about these shoes is the outsole's pretty good. I've not had any problems at all with grip on both of these shoes, and I've run in some wet conditions in both of them, so no issues at all there. And also when it comes to stability, I think the Hoka Rocket X2 is probably best when it comes to stability. They're pretty similar. I don't think they're massively unstable shoes, but I would definitely say that the Hoka Rocket X2 is just it feels a little bit more stable, a little bit more supportive than the Endorphin Elite for me.
So we've got a couple of exciting racing shoes here, and both a little bit different to what we've seen before from the brands involved. We obviously had the Endorphin Elite in at the end of last year, start of this year, and it's a lot firmer, more aggressive, more propulsive than the Endorphin Pro 3 and the other Endorphin shoes we've seen from Saucony before, thanks to this new midsole foam. In general, I'd say it's one of the more aggressive and direct carbon shoes I've tested in a long time. Like, it feels really good when you're going all out. I really enjoyed it for an all out 5k, which is the first run I did in the shoe, and I used it for a 10k race as well, and it does feel incredibly fast, and it does feel efficient, and it feels like it's helping you tick over and maintain paces as you get tired. but it's also quite a harsh shoe for sure. Like, it's a lot firmer than other shoes I've tested, and under my forefoot in particular, the way I snap through when I run, I got a lot of forefoot discomfort. Even over 10k, it's quite interesting that I did have a noticeable level of forefoot discomfort at the end of just 10k. If you're thinking about this shoe for a marathon, that's a bit of a concern. I have gone over 20k in it, including a track session, but a lot of that run was at quite easy paces and I didn't have any discomfort there. So when you ease off the gas a little bit and take it more relaxed, it is still quite a comfortable shoe. It's just when you start running with real purpose, using it as a race shoe, which obviously is what it's intended for, then I think it does feel a little bit hard underfoot compared to some of the other carbon shoes. The upside of that is it's a really resilient foam, and it's no chance of this shoe bottoming out. It's going to just keep producing the same level of bounce and response throughout your runs. It's just whether you can almost take it, because it is quite a hard shoe compared to some of the others on the market, including the Rocket X2, which is a lot softer. I say it almost feels too mushy and soft when you're using it at easy paces, and that was a bit of a concern for me at times. But actually, when you do run fast in it, it firms up a little bit. Like a lot of these shoes, like you engage the plate a lot more when you do run a bit faster. You get a nice, fast, efficient, propulsive ride from it. It's a really nice shoe to run in. It's a lot more likeable as a shoe. It's more comfortable. It's lower drop, and it is a noticeably low drop shoe, and you don't get quite as much thrust forward from it as you get from the Endorphin Elite, but you do get a good level of propulsion. I've used this for a park run in the middle of a session, and then also for a really hard track session last week, and then the Southern Relays at the weekend where I ran a 7.2k leg, so at race pace. And actually the route for that was very similar to the 10k I ran in the Endorphin Elite, so there's a lot of comparisons there, and ran pretty similar pace in both of them. I was a little bit quicker in the Hoka because it was a shorter race, but it was a very different feeling underfoot. Both felt good, both felt efficient and fast, but the Hoka was a lot more comfortable. Like, it was a shoe I could have happily carried on racing for a long period in, no forefoot discomfort, whereas the Endorphin Elite was a little bit harsher on my foot. Like, it wasn't a shoe that I'd look at and go, I'd love to race a half marathon or marathon in that, whereas I do think I could do that in the Hoka very comfortably. The difference, you might have a little bit here is that I have had some concerns about the Hoka bottoming out on over longer hard runs, just because I think this soft foam compresses a little bit. You don't get quite enough response. You're not going to get that at all with the Endorphin Elite. So I think you're going to get a really nice level of propulsion and bounce to it deep into runs. It's a little bit of a worry with the Hoka for me. I still think it's going to be very good on those runs. Like, it wasn't a massive concern on the runs I have experienced it in, but I still have some slight doubts about it looking at things like the marathon in particular. The same way I have doubts about the Elite being comfortable enough, I worry that the Hoka might bottom out a little bit more compared to some of the other super shoes that have slightly firmer foams in the midsole. I do think this is a really soft one. I'll say one note on both of these. I've done very, very wet track sessions in both of these, and I've been really impressed by the amount of grip they have. I've done a session in particular in the Hoka last week where I probably would have used spikes if I was feeling a bit fresher and wasn't worried about knackering the body a bit. But actually doing like a sub 5 minute mile rep in this and then some fast 300 meter reps, even on a basically flooded track, actually grips surprisingly well. So I'm impressed with the grip of both of them. I do think they're both really good shoes, but there are certainly slight concerns of each that might maybe give you some doubts about them for the full marathon in particular.
I've just done the 1 mile side by side with the Rocket X2 on the left foot, and I've got the Saucony Endorphin Elite on the right foot. This is another one that's really surprising, because if you'd asked me before how different these shoes were, I would have said they're quite different. When you put them on, there's a lot of remarkable similarities about the shape, about the way the kind of midsole feels underfoot. So when it comes to that ride feel underfoot, when you're comparing both of these side by side like that, there are some differences. There are a lot of similarities, but there are some differences. And the one thing that really stands out for me is actually that I think the Endorphin Elite are a little bit softer, a little bit sinkier underfoot. You feel that foam compress a little bit more than you do with a Rocket X2, and that's particularly the case in that kind of bit that sits under the midfoot. With the Rocket X2, you've got that pronounced rocker, and the way that foam's positioned, I think under the balls of the foot puts a really nice spring under your foot. It's a little bit less pronounced with the Endorphin Elite. It's a bit flatter, I think, overall. They've both got this kind of rocker that does clip you along. I think they're both really happy shoes for clipping along easy miles and going faster. I've done ultras in the Saucony Endorphin Elite. I've done 3 hours in the Rocket X2, and 7 miles of those were at really sort of slow, steady, sort of 9 minute mile pace, and they cope really well. So I think they've both got quite good versatility. Now, I think that kind of spring under that ball of the foot makes the Hoka Rocket X2 slightly more propulsive, a little bit more punchy, and a little bit more lively than Saucony Endorphin Elite, that just feel a little bit flatter. They feel like you're doing a little bit more of the work. There's not quite so much of a roll through and a clip, I don't think, in each of the steps. The other thing I think to say here is that the roominess that comes with the Saucony Endorphin Elite is nice because you can wiggle your toes and you've got a bit of flex there. The Rocket X2 can feel a little bit cramped. There's a little bit of numbing initially when you first put them on. It takes a little while to sort of forget that and get comfortable in the shoe. But there's a flip side to that, and that is that the Rocket X2 feel really tight and dialed in. And there's no foot movement at all in this shoe. I mean, there is no room for that. You literally could barely move your toes, I think, in the toe box. It's quite tight. So you don't get any slipping. There's no movement of the shoe in corners. It corners really well. The Endorphin Elite, you move around a little bit more. The heel's not so well held in. You know, the actual lace across the middle, the top of the foot isn't so well held in. And your foot does slide a little bit more on that platform in tighter corners. So if you really like that kind of really dialed in kind of race fit, you know, Loctite, no movement off the platform, then I think the Rocket X2 has that more than the Saucony Endorphin Elite. Both shoes feel really light, racy and compact. I think the Hoka Rocket X probably a little bit more so than the Elite. And if we're talking about stability, I think that both of these shoes, for me anyway, I found them to be at the kind of more stable end of kind of super shoes. I think they give you a good, reliable platform to run off, both of them. Again, I actually think here the Rocket X2 has that stability a little bit more than the Saucony Endorphin Elite. I think the final thing of note here is the Hoka Rocket X2. I just think they feel a little bit smoother through the transition. I think that rocker kicks in. I think the toe spring's a little bit more pronounced, and I just think they're doing a little bit more. It's just a little bit more sort of fluid and fun, I think, than the Saucony Endorphin Elite. So for my verdict, I think this comes down to a couple of really quite simple things. The first thing is that I think the Rocket X are marginally more kind of propulsive, a bit more lively, a bit more springy. They're a little bit more agile. They're certainly more compact. So for me, for all out kind of pace, I think the Rocket X2 just edge it marginally. I would definitely choose the Rocket X2 for racing half marathons for sure, anything up to a half marathon. I think for a marathon, the jury's out, and this is why. The comfort of the Rocket X2, they're very, very hugging and very tight. I don't think they've got the sizing quite right on this. I think if you've got kind of wider feet or bigger feet, I know sort of spoke to a lot of other runners, they found the width of the toe box and the tightness of that kind of race hugging fit and that kind of internal cage and the gusseted tongues to be a little bit too restrictive. And if you can't get that sizing right, there may be a little bit more discomfort over the longer distances than you would like. And the Saucony Endorphin Elite give you a little bit more room in that sense. So if you're going to the marathon and beyond, maybe the Saucony Endorphin Elite would be your choice. But then there's another thing that you have to factor into the equation here, and that is the price of the Saucony Endorphin Elite. We've spoken about that in all of the other reviews and the head-to-heads that we've done on this channel. The Endorphin Elite is just, for me, is just overpriced. They've put it up too high. If it were at the same price as the Hoka Rocket X2, I think it'd be a much kind of harder call to make between these two shoes. I think they've both got kind of good values. But when it comes to that kind of overall factoring in the price, I think you're not getting much more of anything really apart from the roomier fit in the Endorphin Elite than you are from the Hoka Rocket X2, and I would be recommending going Hoka Rocket X2 for that reason. On price, it's got the Elite beat hands down, and you're not going to get much more performance out of the Elite. So overall, roomy fit aside, I think the Rocket X2 wins it for me. This is the shoe that I think for most distances I would choose to run and race in over the Endorphin Elite.
So my verdict on these shoes, the two shoes you're going to look at if you probably want a really fast, lightweight feeling shoe for race day. But what I would say about the two shoes is that the Endorphin Elite is a very aggressive feeling shoe. You know it's a race shoe, you know it's pushing you forward, and it's not a very natural feeling shoe. And for some people, I think that's going to be an issue because I don't enjoy running in this shoe. I can run fast in it. I don't enjoy running in it. So I'm going to try it out on some short distances. When I did half marathon in it, I did find it quite uncomfortable. I don't think I'd like to do that again, but I might try it for a few 10Ks and see how it deals with those. The first time I ran in these was a 10K, and I got very close to my PB, and I didn't realise I was getting close to my PB when I was running because I wasn't trying to. So I definitely think it's conducive to running fast, but I just don't think it's a very comfortable shoe. I think it's very skewed towards fast running, where you're probably going to worry less about the comfort and more about the speed that the shoe can offer you. Hoka Rocket X2. Again, I think it's a very fast shoe. I think it's very good. I just think it's a little bit more versatile, a little bit more comfortable, and not as aggressive. So I don't think I could probably... I think if I went in a 10K race and wore one of these two shoes, I think I'm more likely to do well with the Endorphin Elite just because it just propels you forward. But Hoka Rocket X2, I really like, and I'm looking forward to doing some proper racing in it over the next few weeks.
So you've got a couple of very sharp and exciting new racing shoes here. I did say in the full reviews of both, I'd probably just be seeking out a deal on an older carbon shoe, something like the Vaporfly, and that's probably my opinion on lots of carbon shoes these days, is just that there are great older shoes available. But if you are picking between these two, then you are going to get a very good shoe regardless of which one you go for, but I do think they feel quite different on the run. The Elite is firmer, it's more propulsive, the higher drop is noticeable, you get more tip forward, more of an aggressive ride, but at the same time it's a bit harsher over long runs in particular, and there is no risk of bottoming out in it over long runs, but there is more of a risk that it might start to hurt the foot a little bit, that kind of thing, and it's not the most pleasant experience. Whereas the Hoka is a very likeable shoe, a really fun shoe to jump into and run in because it is soft, it is bouncy, looks a bit better as well. It's a shoe I really, really like, even if I do still have some doubts about the soft foam bottoming out a bit over longer races in particular, but I loved it using it for short races and track sessions, that kind of thing. So both of them actually are pretty good in terms of stability and attacking corners at speed, and the races I've done with them, they've been on quite twisty courses and I've not had any concerns with either. Hoka's a bit softer, but it also feels a bit more grounded with that low drop, and this has got, you know, a reasonably firm feel underfoot that I don't really have any concerns about stability. I think for my running style, probably the Elite would help me more in terms of tipping me forward, pushing me on, no bottoming out, but I don't know, again, it might just beat you up a bit more, and then when it comes to long races in particular, it's all about being as fresh as you can be in those last few K, and I think the Hoka is more accessible on that front. It's more comfortable, it's more enjoyable to use, I think it protects the body really nicely, it feels a bit more natural on the foot than this, which is very bouncy and firm underfoot, whereas this does feel a little bit more like an extension of the foot, even though it is delivering still quite a lot of bounce. So yeah, it's a tough one to call. The Hoka is a lot cheaper though, and I do think it's a shoe that more runners will be able to fall in love with than the Endorphin Elite, which is a little bit hard to love. So it's an easy one to recommend on that front, because I do think the performance is definitely there with the Hoka, just those slight concerns about the longer runs. If I had no concerns about price or anything, if I was gunning for a PB right now, maybe I'd still lean slightly to the Elite myself, but I think overall my recommendation would probably be to go for the Hoka Rocket X, because it's the cheaper, more enjoyable, accessible shoe, and I think people will get on with it really well. It's a very good racing shoe.